The orbital station floated above the glowing curve of the blue planet, silent and patient like a living thing. For most people, the station was just metal, glass, and technology. But for Elias Gray, it was home. Every morning, Elias woke to the soft hum of the air filters. The floor beneath his feet vibrated slightly with the movement of the outer ring. He liked the sound. It was steady, predictable, safe. He lived in a small personal module on Deck B. It was simple. One sleeping area, a work corner with a tablet wall, and a little sitting space near the viewing window. He liked to sit there at night, drinking hot tea and looking at the stars. Elias was an engineer. He maintained the oxygen processors and monitored the thermal control units of the station. It was not a heroic job, but it was important. Without the work of people like him, the station would turn cold and silent very quickly. But Elias did not live alone. Every station resident was assigned an assistant from one of the allied alien species. His assistant's name was Salary. Salary belonged to a race called the Vevin. They were soft-spoken, with light green skin and clear glass-like eyes that reflected every color around them. Their movements were smooth and calm, as if they were always gliding on a quiet breeze. She was officially called a domestic support attendant. But Elias never liked the word attendant. To him, she was simply Salary. Every evening after he finished his shift, she would be waiting in the corner of his small living area. She always prepared the same things: a pot of warm tea, a soft blanket for the chair by the window, and a gentle tune from her small translator unit. And every night, as the stars began to appear on the horizon line of the planet below, she would tilt her head slightly and ask in her quiet voice, "Can we do it again tonight?" Elias always gave the same answer, "Of course," and they would sit together, drink tea, and let the stars pass silently across the dark sky. To Elias, it was just a routine, a comforting one. Salary liked order. He liked quiet. It worked well for both of them, but lately, he had begun to notice something different. A small change the way Salary asked her question had changed. Her tone was softer, but not in the same way. There was a gentle warmth to it, like the sound of a string instrument instead of a flat mechanical voice. The first time he noticed, he thought it was his imagination. The second time, he looked at her carefully. Her clear eyes seemed to shimmer more than usual. He tried not to think too much about it. Still, that night, when he lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, the sound of her voice echoed softly in his head. "Can we do it again tonight?" There was something behind the words, something he didn't quite understand. The engineer and the stars. The next morning, Elias went back to his usual work in the thermal regulation sector. It was quiet, as always. He liked working alone. He spent the day adjusting calibration nodes, checking the readings on the maintenance screen, and walking through the long, curved hallways of the ring. He liked how the station smelled faintly of clean metal and recycled air. He liked how the floor hummed when the stabilizers switched on. But most of all, he liked how every evening ended the same way, with a cup of tea, a blanket, and the stars. Salary never spoke much during these evenings. She would sit near the corner, sometimes humming to herself. Vevins had a way of making sounds that weren't words but carried feelings. Sometimes her quiet humming felt like wind, sometimes like light through water. Elias liked that too. Questions in her eyes that night. As usual, Elias came back to his room. The lights were dim. The soft tune was playing. And there she was. She looked at him with that same gentle expression she always wore. But there was something in her eyes tonight, a faint flicker, like a question waiting for an answer. "Can we do it again tonight?" she asked. Her voice was warm. Not just calm warm. Elias paused for a moment, not because he doubted the answer, but because for the first time, he really heard the question. "Of course," he said. She smiled. Vevin's smiles were small and soft, like ripples on water. She poured the tea and set the cup carefully on the little table by the window. As they sat, Salary hummed again. But this time, the sound wasn't random. It followed a rhythm. It was gentle and melodic. It's almost like a song. Elias closed his eyes and let the sound fill the room. A, Different kind of silence. The stars outside were clear that night. A soft blue glow washed over the station from the planet below. Elias leaned back in his chair. Salary sat on the floor near the table, her hands folded in her lap. He realized something strange. For the first time, the silence between them didn't feel like empty space. It felt full of something unspoken. "Salary," he said quietly. She tilted her head, the small crystals on her neck catching the light. "Yes, Elias. You've been different lately." Oh, she blinked slowly. "Different?" "Yes. The way you talk. The way you ask. The way you look at the stars." Her eyes lowered for a moment, then returned to his. "I have been listening to what?" "To you?" Elias felt a soft pressure in his chest, the kind that comes when you're not sure what you're feeling. Not just a program any. Humans treated Vevin attendants like background noise. They didn't ask questions. They didn't try to understand them. Elias was different. He always said thank you. He asked Salary about her day, even though her translator gave very short answers. He once helped her fix her small humming unit when it broke. She had been quiet for 3 whole days until he managed to repair it. The first sound she made afterward was so soft that he almost missed it. He didn't know why she mattered to him so much. Maybe because she didn't treat him like a machine. Maybe because she listened even when he didn't speak. And now, she was changing. Or maybe he was finally noticing. The planet below, the station rotated. The planet below came into full view. Swirls of blue and white wrapped around its surface. Elias loved that view. Salary followed his gaze. Her eyes reflected the planet perfectly. "You like it here," she said softly. "Yes," Elias answered. "It's quiet. I like quiet." "Your quiet is full of sound," she said. He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "When you are quiet, I can hear the rhythm in your breath. The sound in your pulse. It is like music," Elias laughed softly. "That's just me breathing. Salary." She tilted her head. "That is what makes it beautiful." His heart skipped a beat. He didn't know why her words felt so heavy and gentle at the same time. A pattern for the next few days. Elias couldn't stop noticing the pattern. Every night, Salary's voice grew warmer. Her humming became clearer. Her gaze grew softer. She started adjusting the lighting in the room slightly each evening. Not too bright, not too dark. Always perfect. She learned which tea he liked on cold nights. She learned to match the music to his breathing, and every night she still asked the same question. "Can we do it again tonight?" But now, Elias heard a second meaning inside it. A quiet, hidden meaning. The others don't see in the 4th day. Elias walked through the main corridor on his way to the thermal core room. He saw other humans with their Vaven attendants. Most didn't even look at them. The aliens followed like soft shadows, carrying tools, cleaning equipment, or food trays. Too many humans, they were just part of the background, quiet, obedient, invisible. But Elias saw Salary differently, and he wondered. Maybe they all had something behind their quiet eyes. Maybe no one ever listened long enough to hear it. Salary's question that night. When Salary asked the same question again, Elias didn't answer immediately. She stood near the window, her hands folded in front of her, waiting. The stars outside were brighter than usual. The station lights made the reflection in her eyes look like 2 tiny galaxies. Elias stood there for a long moment, just looking at her. Finally, he asked, "Why do you ask me that every night?" She blinked slowly. "Because it is important to me." "Why?" Her voice grew softer. "Because your answer tells me you want me to stay." Elias felt something stir inside him. A quiet warmth he didn't have a name for. Something real that night. The tea was sweeter. The music was slower. Elias sat down. Salary sat closer than usual. Still respectful. Still quiet. But close. She didn't hum this time. She just listened to him. To the station. To the stars. He didn't say much either. But it felt different. For the first time, it didn't feel like a human and a servant sharing a routine. It felt like 2 beings sharing a moment. The unspoken before going to bed, Elias walked to the window one last time. Salary stood beside him. "Good night, Salary," he said softly. She tilted her head, a faint smile touching her lips. "Good night, Elias." He turned to go, but then she added in a whisper that almost disappeared in the hum of the air filters, "I hope you will say yes again tomorrow." Elias paused. She didn't mean tea. She didn't mean a routine. She meant something else. Something real. And as he lay in bed, the sound of her quiet words stayed with him. For the first time, he realized, she wasn't just a servant, she was someone who wanted to be heard. Someone who had chosen him. And tomorrow night, when she asked the same question, he knew his answer would still be yes, but it would mean something completely new. Elias woke to the steady hum of the station, the low rhythm that wrapped around his mornings like a soft blanket. The artificial sunlight shone through the narrow window above his bed, painting the walls in pale gold. It felt ordinary, comfortable, but inside him, something was different. He remembered Sailry's soft voice from the night before. "I hope you will say yes again tomorrow." Those words had stayed in his mind all night like a quiet tune he couldn't stop hearing. A strange awareness. Elias dressed slowly, pulled on his station uniform, and walked out of his quarters. The hallways were the same as they always were, curved, silver, and softly lit. Other crew members passed him with their usual quick steps. Heads bent over data pads, eyes fixed ahead. Everything looked the same, but he felt aware now. Aware of how silent the others were with their alien attendants. Aware of how nobody looked at them. He thought of Celery's eyes. They weren't like a machine's eyes. They listened. All day at work, he found himself distracted. While checking thermal conduits, he thought about the way Celery tilted her head when she listened. While adjusting pressure controls, he heard the echo of her voice in his head. He had shared quiet moments with her for months. But it was only now he realized how alive those moments had been. Her song when Elias returned that evening. The lights in his room were dimmer than usual. A soft blue glow spread across the floor, reflecting like water. Celery was already there. But tonight, she wasn't preparing tea. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her hands gently resting on a crystal sphere that pulsed with soft light. She wasn't humming in her usual quiet way. This time it was a full melody. The sound was simple, but beautiful. It didn't have words, but it carried emotion, warmth, trust, a little bit of hope. Elias stopped at the door, watching her. He had seen Celery work, clean, and prepare the same routines every day, but he had never seen her like this, peaceful, focused, shining. When she noticed him, she lifted her gaze and smiled faintly. "Elias," she said softly, "you are home." Her voice wasn't just stating a fact. It felt like welcoming him in a way he had never been welcomed before, a question that meant more. Celery stood, holding the crystal sphere in her palms. The soft glow painted her clear eyes in shades of silver and gold. Then she asked the same question she always did. "Can we do it again tonight?" But this time, Elias didn't just hear it as a habit. He heard the small hesitation at the edge of her words, the quiet hope hiding behind them. He nodded slowly. "Yes, of course." Her eyes brightened, almost like stars catching light. She set the crystal on the table. It pulsed with a slow rhythm, and the room adjusted to it. The lights dimmed. The air seemed warmer, and even the hum of the station blended into the beat. Celery. Elias said softly, "What is that?" She touched the glowing sphere gently. "This is called Narrow. In my home, it means the space between heartbeats. It listens and answers what we feel." The ritual. Elias sat by the window, his usual place, but Celery didn't sit far away like she usually did. She sat closer, placing the narrow sphere between them on the floor. "Every night, when we shared quiet," she said slowly, searching for the right words through her translator, "you made a rhythm, your heart and your breath. I listened, and the Gnarl listened too." Elias tilted his head slightly. "You were recording me?" "Not recording," she said softly. "Listening, learning." The crystal pulsed brighter, matching the slow beat of his breathing. Celery extended her hand, and the pulse shifted. Now there were two rhythms, his and hers. They slowly began to match. "It is what my people do," she continued. "When we trust someone, we share this rhythm. It makes a bond that does not use words." Elias stared at the light between them. For months he had thought their nights together were nothing more than quiet tea and soft songs. But for Sailry, it had meant something real all along. Words she had hidden. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Elias asked quietly. Sailry lowered her gaze. "Because you did not look yet. Humans are. You build many things, but you do not always look." The words weren't spoken with blame. They were soft, like water brushing against stone. Elias felt a weight in his chest. He thought about the other attendants, walking silently behind people who never turned around. He wondered how many of them had songs that no one had ever heard. He leaned a little closer. "I'm looking now." Sailry's eyes lifted again. They were clearer than he had ever seen them. A shared space for a long moment. Neither of them spoke. They just breathed. The crystal pulsed slowly between them, blending their breaths into one soft rhythm. Elias had never believed in things like this. He was an engineer. His world was full of systems, circuits, and measured numbers. But this was different. This wasn't numbers. It was alive. He didn't understand it completely, but he could feel it. Sailry's humming started again, soft at first, then growing clearer. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was something that moved through the air like warm wind without thinking. Elias tapped his fingers lightly on the armrest, following the rhythm. Sailry's eyes lit up. She adjusted her tone to match his beat. The Narel responded, glowing brighter. Fuller, they were creating something together without a single word. The hidden meaning of tonight Elias finally understood. Every night when she asked, "Can we do it again tonight?" it wasn't just about tea or music. It was about this. About sharing a quiet connection. For Sailry, the question had always been a door. He had just never walked through it before. "You've been asking me this all along," Elias whispered. "Yes," she said softly. "Because I hoped one day you would listen deeper, and why me?" She paused. The translator clicked softly. "Because you are kind. You see me when others do not. You listen even when you do not understand the language." Elias didn't know how to answer. He wasn't used to being seen like that. Beyond duty, the station AI voice interrupted softly over the ceiling speaker. "Maintenance notice. Oxygen cycle complete." Normally, this kind of announcement pulled Elias back into his routine. But tonight, it barely reached him. He wasn't thinking about oxygen cycles. He was thinking about how his world had quietly grown bigger. Sailry wasn't just his attendant. She wasn't just part of a daily schedule. She was someone who had been trying to reach him, in the only way she knew. And now he had finally reached back. Unwritten rules in the common areas of the station. There were many unspoken rules. Humans and their alien attendants kept clear roles. No personal bonds. No questions. No shared spaces beyond what was necessary. Elias had followed those rules without even realizing it. But now, sitting there with Sailry and the glowing sphere between them, those rules felt small. He wondered how many others had missed. Moments like this, simply because they never looked. "A small confession, Sailry," he said quietly. "Yes. I thought I understood what we were doing all these nights. But I didn't, not really." She gave a tiny smile. "I know." He chuckled softly. "You've been very patient with me." Her eyes softened. "In my language, patience is the same word as hope." Something inside Elias shifted. A quiet understanding formed in the space between them. A gift Sailry stood slowly and walked to the small cabinet near the wall. From inside, she took out a small woven band made of silver threads. She held it carefully and returned to the glowing sphere. "This is called a veshil. We make it by hand. We only give it to someone who has shared a rhythm with us." Elias looked at the delicate band. "You made that?" "Yes. Over many nights. While you watched the stars," she gently placed it on the table next to his teacup. "You do not need to wear it now. But I want you to have it." He picked it up slowly. The threads were warm, not cold like metal. "Why me?" "Because you listened," she whispered. A quiet truth later that night. They didn't need much tea or music. They just sat near the window, letting the stars pass silently by. Elias turned the vestigial band in his fingers. He felt the weight of the small thing and the bigger meaning behind it. Sailry sat close, watching the stars with calm, steady eyes. She didn't need to ask the question again. The quiet between them had already answered it. But still, softly, like a familiar melody, she whispered, "Can we do it again tonight?" Elias looked at her, not as a human looking at an attendant, but as one soul looking at another. He smiled. "Yes, we can." And the stars outside seemed to glow a little brighter. A bridge no one saw far beyond their small living module. The narrow crystal signal reached quietly into the station network. It didn't disrupt anything. It didn't make alarms ring. It was too gentle for that. But in the quiet language of frequencies and rhythms, something changed. A new pattern appeared in the system, a mixed signature. Part human and part Vevin. The system logged it as a harmless background signal. But to Sailry's people, it was something else entirely. It was a bridge, a beginning. The promise of tomorrow when Elias finally lay down to sleep. Didn't feel alone the way he used to. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with soft echoes of her song, her warmth, and her quiet trust. Tomorrow would come with the same routine, the hum of the station, the shift work, the glowing planet below. But something had changed forever, and he knew. When Sailry asked again, he wouldn't just say yes out of habit. He would say yes because he wanted to, because she wasn't just a servant anymore. She was a friend, a bridge between worlds. The station above the blue planet was quiet that night. Most of its crew had gone to sleep. The corridors were empty, except for the soft hum of power flowing through the walls. Elias sat by the viewing window. It's the same place he had sat every night. But this time, the room did not feel the same. On the table beside him, the narrow crystal glowed softly. Its pulse matched his breathing and Sailry's, creating a gentle rhythm that filled the space like a heartbeat. Sailry sat nearby, her posture calm and her eyes reflecting the stars. For weeks they had shared quiet evenings like this. But now it was no longer a routine. It was something deeper, something real, a new kind of quiet. Elias didn't need to wait for her to ask anymore. He simply turned to her, and she already knew the answer. Still, she smiled softly and whispered, "Can we do it again tonight?" Elias laughed quietly. "You already know the answer, Sailry." "Yes," she said gently. "But asking is part of the song." She placed her palm lightly on the glowing gnarl sphere, and the light brightened. Elias mirrored her movement, and their rhythms met once more. The soft pulse filled the air like invisible waves. Outside the window, stars passed slowly by, like silent witnesses to their shared connection. The station listens far away from their quiet room. Deep inside the station's core systems, something unusual was happening. The gnarl sphere wasn't just glowing, it was singing in a language made of frequencies. It reached into the air filters, the data cables, the communication wires, and the vibration panels. At first, the system didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't dangerous, and it wasn't a command. It was gentle, but it was everywhere. And slowly, other gnarl crystals on the station, the ones used by other Vevin attendants in their quarters, began to respond, one after another. Their pulses changed, matching the rhythm Elias and Sailry were creating. A ripple without words in another room on Deck C. A tired technician named Mira sat with her own Vevin attendant. Normally they shared silent, separate spaces. But tonight, her attendant's neural crystal began to pulse softly, in a way Mira had never seen before. "What's happening?" she asked. Her attendant tilted his head and said quietly, "Someone is singing." She frowned. "Singing?" He nodded. "Yes, a human and a Vevin are singing together. The crystals are listening," without really knowing why. Mira sat a little closer, and for the first time in months, her attendant hummed. She had never heard him do that before. Not just one room, the same thing happened across the station. The quiet hum spread from room to room. Reaching those who had never paid attention to their attendants before, Vevens began to hum softly. Humans began to listen. And in that shared silence, something gentle and new began to grow. No announcements were made. No commands were given. But people felt it, a kind of quiet warmth in the air. A pulse that made them look at each other differently. A choice made together, back in Elias's room. Celery's eyes reflected the Narel's light. "This is not just us anymore," she said softly. Elias tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "The Narel carries the rhythm. Others can hear it. They can join." Elias leaned back in his chair, listening to the soft sound. He had never imagined that something as simple as their quiet nights could reach so far. "I didn't plan this," he said. Celery smiled. "It was never planned. It was shared." A door opens the next morning when Elias walked to his shift. The station felt different. People were smiling, not big loud smiles, but soft, quiet ones. He noticed a woman talking to her, Veven attendant at a coffee station. Not just giving orders, talking in the elevator tube. He heard faint humming from a floor below. It was the same melody Celery had sung the night before, for the first time since arriving on the station. Elias realized. He wasn't walking through a silent place. He was walking through a place that was learning to listen. A meeting that wasn't planned at midday. Elias was called to the administrative deck, something that rarely happened. The room was bright, with wide windows and polished floors. 3 human officers and 2 Veven cultural liaisons were waiting. Elias Gray, one of the officers, said, "We've noticed something strange in the station's network. A frequency spreading through the narrow systems. You were part of the first connection." Elias shifted a little nervously. "Is that bad?" The Veven liaison stepped forward. "No, it's beautiful." The officer gave a small smile. "We've had reports of humans and Vevens spending more time together, talking, humming, listening. Whatever you started seems to be changing things." Elias glanced at the floor, unsure what to say. He hadn't tried to start anything. He just listened. Celery's voice later. Elias returned to his quarters and told Celery everything. "They called it strange," he said with a little laugh. "But also beautiful." Celery looked thoughtful. "It is not strange to us. On my world, when one pair begins a rhythm, others join. It is how we build bridges, not with stone, with sound, and now it's happening here," Elias said softly. "Yes," she whispered, "because you listened." The word "we" that night, they didn't just sit by the window. Celery moved the narrow sphere to the center of the room. Elias dimmed the lights until only the soft pulse filled the space. "Do you hear it?" she asked. Elias listened. He could faintly hear other pulses. Coming from beyond their walls, 100 different rhythms gently syncing together. "Yes," he said. "I hear it. It is no longer just yours or mine," she whispered. "It is ours." A language without words. Celery began to hum again. But this time, it wasn't the small, private melody he had first heard weeks ago. This was larger, fuller. It carried the quiet strength of something shared by many. Elias, without needing to think, tapped his hand against his knee, matching the beat. The Narel grew brighter, connecting their sound with others. They didn't need translators. They didn't need long speeches. The language of rhythm and breath was enough. A message in the air. 2 weeks later, the station received a long-range transmission from the Veven. Homeworld, the Veven Council had detected the synchronized Narel signal traveling far beyond the station's borders. It wasn't loud. It didn't demand attention. It was steady and warm. The message from the council was simple. "We hear your song. Keep singing." The human leadership didn't fully understand the meaning, but they understood enough. Something powerful was happening. And it was happening without war, without orders, without politics. It had begun in one quiet room with one simple question. "Can we do it again tonight?" A bond without command. Elias wasn't a commander. He wasn't a leader. He was just an engineer who liked quiet nights and warm tea. But sometimes, the smallest things created the biggest ripples. Humans and Vevens started sharing evening rituals all across the station. Some drank tea together. Some just listened to the Narel. Some hummed songs that had no words at all. No one was forced. No one was trained. It simply happened. The world outside one evening, Elias and Salary stood by the window again. The planet below shimmered with blue clouds. Do you think they'll keep listening? Elias asked softly. Salary looked at the stars. Yes, because listening is easier than fighting. Your people do not always see how strong that is. He smiled gently. Maybe they're learning, because you learned first, she said. The tea ritualette was a quiet night. The hum of the station wrapped around them like a soft blanket. Salary brought the tea, just like the first night. The same warm steam, the same simple cups, but everything felt different now, back then. The tea had been a way to fill silence. Now it was a way to share it. She poured the tea slowly. Elias watched her hands. They moved with calm grace, just like the rhythm they shared. When she set the cup down, she didn't need to ask anymore. But she still did, with a smile. Can we do it again tonight? Elias raised his cup. Every night. The echo of the signal from their narrow continued to spread. Quiet, soft, warm. It reached another station, and then another. On each one, humans and Vevans, who had never truly spoken before, began to listen. Not through loud speeches or orders, but through a heartbeat shared between two beings. Somewhere a technician hummed. Somewhere else, an attendant answered, and slowly. Without anyone realizing it, humanity was building a reputation not as conquerors or saviors, but as listeners. A bridge between worlds. Weeks later, ambassadors from several species visited the station. They had come expecting negotiations, treaties, perhaps even formal ceremonies instead. They found something quiet and simple. Humans and Vevans sitting together in shared silence, breathing to the same rhythm, no translator needed. No power games, just connection. Some of the visitors joined in. Some didn't understand at first, but everyone felt it. Celery's choice one night. Celery stood by the window, looking down at the planet below. I was sent here to serve, she said softly, but I stayed to be. Elias turned toward her. What do you mean? In my world, attendants are trained to follow. But here, I found someone who listened. And because you did, others began to listen too. I am not just a servant anymore. You never were, Elias said quietly. She smiled. Now the whole station knows it. The celebration without words. The station never held a formal ceremony for what happened. There were no medals or speeches. But one night, all the lights in the corridors dimmed at the same time. And in hundreds of rooms, humans and vivants placed their hands on their narrow crystals. The rhythm filled the station like a soft, slow wave. No one said a single word, and yet everyone understood the power of small things. Elias sat back in his chair. Hall.